My parents brought me home from William Booth Hospital in Covington, Kentucky, so my family origin says. They really didn't have a place for me, a bed for me, so they took my brother or sister's wagon, put some blankets in it, and made a bed for me. Well, at least that's what the story goes. But 31 years later, I was a social worker working on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I got a phone call from my supervisor late one night. One of my clients who had been shepherding through her prenatal care, one of my clients had gone into labor, delivered a baby boy, and was bringing him home. Child Protective Services arrived unexpectedly that night, and they gave her an ultimatum, because when they arrived at the SRO room where she lived, that 10 by 10 room with a bathroom facility down the hall and cooking facilities the other way down the other hall, when they came to that SRO room, they found the baby, not in a wagon, but in a dresser drawer. She had stuffed some clothing and some blankets and laid her newborn infant in a dresser drawer. You have to have a proper crib, they said, and I went out that night at midnight searching for a crib so she could keep her baby. Well, the state of children in America is still just as precarious as it was for me lying in my brother's wagon or that little baby boy lying in a dresser drawer. In America, you'd be surprised to know that we lag behind 27 developed countries in child mortality. Finland and Japan, the children there have a 3 times as much chance as children in America do of survival. And we're behind countries like Cuba or Slovakia or even Lebanon. It's crazy, but here in America, children are really at risk. I'm thinking of kids today because there's a story from the Jewish scriptures in the story of the Exodus, the escape of the people of Israel from slavery in Egypt. And there's a new Pharaoh, a new king that arrives on the scene. And he sees this vast throng of people and he enslaves them. He puts them to hard work. And when he sees them growing in power and strength, he decides to rid them of all the newborn baby boys. Well, the Pharaoh is called the son of the Sun King Ra. And he calls the Egyptian midwives to his court and he tells them that they must kill any baby boy that is born in the land. Well, the Egyptian midwives, they rebel at such tyranny. They say, these Hebrew women, they deliver the babies so fast, we can't even arrive before they show up. It's a small act of resistance, but that small act makes a difference. Maybe you know the story. A mother gives birth to a baby boy, and she fears for his life, so she weaves a basket and places him in it and lays him in the shallow marshes of the Nile River. His sister watches from afar to make sure no harm comes to him, and meanwhile, an Egyptian princess arrives to bathe in the waters, and she sees the little baby. She takes him to her court. She adopts him as her own. He grows up. His name is Moses. Moses, the leader, the revolutionary, the man who leads his people from slavery to freedom. All because some Egyptian midwives resisted the tyranny of the sun god Ra, the Pharaoh. I remember reading a story by a researcher named Edward Lorenz. And in the 1970s, Lorenz was doing some meteorological studies in predicting weather patterns. And he discovered something, that if he changed his computer profiles by 1,000th of 1%, the models that were produced for weather changed dramatically. And he wrote a little paper entitled this, Predictability, Does a Butterfly Flapping Its Wings in Brazil Create a Tornado in Texas? By that he meant small changes can have huge results. Well, that's an interesting concept, isn't it? Do what we do our small actions make a huge difference in the world that we live in? Years ago, there was a man who noted for creating seeds that fed millions and millions of people, pulling them out of famine. His name was Norman Borlaug. And Borlaug had been hired in New Mexico by an unknown vice president, Henry Wallace. Wallace hired him to develop seeds that would grow well in arid conditions. Now, Wallace had a teacher, and his teacher was a scientist named George Washington Carver, who instilled in that future vice president a love of nature and of growing things. And George Washington Carver, he was adopted by a man named Moses and a woman named Sarah. They adopted this little child when he had nowhere else to go. Do you get the idea that all of our actions are connected to one another? The scientist, the vice president, the great inventor George Washington Carver, the parents who adopted him. All of our actions in this life matter and make a difference. It's the butterfly effect. This week, you can give someone a call who is feeling depressed and lonely, and they in turn might reach out to someone else. You can give your grandson or daughter a hug, and they in turn might reach out to a friend of theirs who's being bullied on social media. You might leave some groceries at the doorstep of someone who's lost their job, and they in turn will feed their children. You might make a face mask for a frontline responder, and they might be part of a clinical trial that could find a vaccine for this coronavirus. My friends, we hold in our hands the potential for good or for evil, to heal the world or to damage it anymore. This week, take the opportunity to practice the butterfly effect. Use a small action, a small word, an encouragement to make a difference in the world we live in. Who knows what the effect might be?